Men, my date booty called another dude in front of me mid-date last night and left. What's the worst date you've experienced? Title: My college crush asked me out on a date and I was so happy. Show up to the restaurant, she arrives, we get a table and start chatting. About 10 minutes in, another dude shows up and sits down with us. I'm super confused, but she introduces him as a friend and I mean, what am I supposed to do? A few minutes later this dude goes to the bathroom, and while he's gone she leans in close to me. Tells me this is the guy she really wants to date, but she's not sure if he's right for her. She wants me to evaluate him because she really values my opinion and wouldn't date a guy the first didn't approve of. She didn't exactly make a booty call in front of me, but she asked me on a date to get my approval for the guy she really wanted. Some things stick with you forever. You're so deep in her friend zone that she would ask you as maid of honor for her wedding. Sorry dude F. I was invited on a date by a woman I met on Tinder. She said her friend was in town and they were going to see a live podcast and invited me with. It was a podcast I'd never heard of before and honestly I probably wouldn't be very interested in it if I wasn't invited, but it cost like $25 to get in. I get there and she meets me and we buy a drink and sit down. She introduces me to her friend. They then proceed to talk to each other, not involving me in conversation at all. Then some guy comes along and sits next to her friend. He introduces himself to me, and I thought he was just being friendly. After the podcast, my date and her friend are still talking to each other and ignoring me. This guy who introduced himself to me is kind of following us and he starts having a conversation with me, which is fine because my date wasn't talking to me at all. It turns out this guy was her friend's date, but I had no idea because no one was saying anything to me. The girls then wanted to meet the guy who was doing the podcast, so we waited in line for a while. Of course the girls never said anything to us guys. The girls then started talking to another woman in line and seemed to make a friend. After they got to meet the guy who did the podcast, my date's friend turns to us guys and says, well, we think we're going to have a girls' night out now. So our dates and the woman they met just left to go get drinks or something. The other guy and I just turned to each other and said WTF. We then decided to go to a nearby bar for a beer and have a bro date. He was a decent dude. But the whole situation was just so weird. She brought her friends and expected me to pay for everyone. Her friends were cool but the date ended up being a girls' night out on me. Yeah, no thanks. Edit thanks for all the votes. To clarify, I did not pay for anything. My meal and drinks came to 30 of the 300-odd bill. I tipped the waiter 30 and toilet dashed. Thanks for the reward. Didn't think my all-faded date warranted it. On 3 separate occasions, with 3 different women, in different states. At the end of the second date, these young ladies apparently had a change of heart on their sexuality and came out to me as being a lesbian. It is for that reason, some of my friends refer to me as Team Changer. We had a lovely time eating and went on to have a cocktail at the River Bar. It is a popular place to have a date. After having a seat she looked around and suddenly acted weird. At some point she stood up and went to a table, arguing with a guy who was with a woman. She made a gesture and I went over. She was telling the guy she moved on and I am her BF now. We haven't kissed before, it was our first date, but she tried to French kiss me and became quite forceful. I pushed her back gently and told her to calm down. She was angry and went on to the bar to chat with a guy I assume she didn't know and went with him to sit at a different table. Still standing next to the other couple. I didn't know how to feel, so we burst out laughing to shake the tension. I wished them a lovely evening and went. I guess this is one of my worst ones. I once went dancing with a date and she went home with someone she met at the club. Slite. This thread is a massacre. When I was in high school summer after junior year, I went to a house party hosted by some kids in the neighboring town I played travel soccer with. This really cute girl I didn't know overheard me mention that I thinking of going to beach the following day. She immediately started flirting with me the rest of the night and strongly suggested that I take her with me so we can spend the day together. So I pick her up the next day and we get to the beach and lo and behold all her closest guy friends including the guy she clearly really wanted was there. Apparently, she just needed me to get there and didn't bother even introducing me to anyone. I felt like a fucking moron. I stuck it out basically by myself for a few hours while she chilled with them, but I wound up getting the last laugh. They were heading back to one of their houses for a pool party and didn't have room for her, so she comes back asking me if I want to go. I told her sorry, I have plans, got in my car and left her standing there in the parking lot. Her dad apparently had to come pick her up 2 hours later. When he got off work. Haha, I had a similar one. Guy Booty called her, "Elm at your door, are you home?" She just stood up and left. Mate, nothing I say will come close to this. I'm straight, but do you want to go on a date? I'll make it up to you. Slite. You shouldn't cringe at this, it's absolutely beautiful. It was like the universe giving her a message to be more upfront in future. I was being honest and told the girl that I was a virgin. She said, "Sorry, I can't be your first," and got up and left. I was once making out with an older girl. In the midst of the action, she said she had to go to the bathroom and never came back. Later on, she messaged me, saying she couldn't stop thinking about her ex whilst making out with me and had to leave so as to call him. Go figure. Not me, but my wife and I observed this in a nice restaurant in Berkeley, CA a long time ago. We were having the pre-fixed dinner, and sat down a booth away from another, younger couple, early 20s. After a while the woman gets up, and presumably goes to the bathroom. We are minding our own business, but after a while we notice the guy is sitting there by himself for quite a long time. The waiter comes up to him, and they have a serious conversation that we can't hear. Then they get up together and leave. A few minutes later, they come back, and the guy leaves. When we finished and were leaving, we asked the cashier what was going on. He said that the couple were on a date, and had agreed to go Dutch on the pre-fixed dinner. Dinner for two plus wine would probably be $150-ish or so, and she ditched him after the main course. He did not have a credit card or enough cash to cover both the dinners, so the waiter escorted him to the nearest ATM outside, where he got cash to pay for both their meals. Poor guy. However, not nearly as bad as your story. You win. It was not a date, to me at least. I was invited to dinner and a movie by my physical therapist after completion of long-term treatment after a car accident. I get to her house and a party is in progress. It is our engagement party. She had told her whole family that we had been dating and now were getting married. They even had a banner with our names on it. I walked out. BTW, I am gay. I had been talking to the new girl at work. She had been over to my apartment once and we had gone running on a second meet-up. We also had a movie night that turned into a light make-out session at my apartment. She still lived at home. I invited her over to make her dinner after those first few meetups and she brought her boyfriend. We all had a drink and then I made the excuse that I had to go out, and they had to go. No soup for you. She said she left the last guy 'cause he drunk too much. She proceeded to have 9 beers on each of our 2 dates. I struggled to go through 3. My idea on drinking a lot is now somehow fuzzy. Man, fuck her. I got invited to a concert out of town by a girl in my uni. Just me and her, and we had been on 1 date before. The date ended with her disappearing without a word, and after an hour or so I got a message from her brother who said he could drive me home for way too much money, but I kinda had to accept since I was stuck. Maybe it was just a complex taxi scheme? A lot of setup for $50. $50? I was thinking 10. Homie, it's totally worth it for 50. Uber hates this one family-owned business trick. It was a Tinder date. We went for lunch. She was so boring, gave one-word answers to most questions etc. Final nail in the coffin was when she asked me what I did for a living and I told her and explained, I'm a manufacturing engineer working for a large car company. Just after this I went to the toilet. On the way back to my seat I noticed she was midway through Googling how much manufacturing engineers make a year. I finished my lunch then excused myself to the toilet again, but I just walked out and left. Haven't got time for people like that. We matched on Tinder on a Thursday night. We clicked immediately and agreed to meet, but both had plans the Friday and Saturday, so we agreed to meet on Monday night after work. The entire time in between we were talking constantly, both super into each other. She was telling me how nervous she was because she was so interested in me that she wasn't ashamed to be that forward. I'm a guy, so of course I'm into that. Monday rolls around and we're a couple hours away from the date, still texting, but now she's super nervous and not sure what to wear. I said sir, whatever makes you comfortable. I'm just going casual and sent her a picture of me in what I was wearing. Just a band t-shirt and chinos, very casual and comfortable. This served two purposes. I'm a little chubby and she was so clearly into me I had convinced myself she wasn't aware of he chub. So I wanted her to know what she should expect in an hour or so. She approves, can't wait to meet me etc., and gets on the road, so silence for a bit. I go to where we're meeting and tell her where I'm at. I see her pull in and she texts asking where I am because she can't see me. So I get out the car and walk towards hers because I can already see her. I text back saying I'm near the bus shelter. I see her get out of her car, she looks toward the bus shelter and sees me. Even in the dark of the evening I see her recoil at the sight of me. I can see her debate internally in a matter of seconds whether or not to just jump back into her car or give me a chance. I say hi, already knowing this is going to be terrible. We walk to the bowling alley where we've planned to go and I give her a mini tour of the town we're in because she hasn't been there before and I'm just getting nothing in response. We get to the bowling alley and I offer her a drink and she turns me down. Okay, fair enough. So I'm sipping my beer trying to get conversation out of her and getting nothing back. We go to bowl our game and one make jokes and be silly just trying to get her to laugh or something, but she spends almost all her time texting and giving me blunt responses. She wins at bowling, I suck, that's just how it is. And I ask if she wants to hang out for a bit more or head home. She says she wants to stay for a little while longer, so we sit at the bar and we barely speak because I'm getting nothing out of her. Eventually I just call it and say I have to be up early for work, so I walk her to her car. She opens her door, turns around and holds an arm out and says I'm not going to hug you. I'm not being rude, I just have a thing for physical contact on the first date. I say okay even though I didn't even go in for a hug or a kiss. I say drive safe and send her on her way. I go home and about an hour later I get a text saying just got home. Thanks for a lovely evening, and never heard from her again, was ghosted after that. Boy, was that a shot to the confidence. Super interested until she saw me in person, then it was a total 180. Edit. I was at that point in time 85 kilograms at 5 feet 10 after losing a bunch of weight, so all my pictures were recent to reflect that. I didn't catfish her. She was chewing gum when her mixed drink and appetizer came. She spit it into her hand and stuck it under the table. I slapped $50 down, got my pocket knife out and scraped it off the bottom of the table and walked to the men's room and put it in the trash. Walked back to the table and told her to enjoy her night. Bro, you're a saint, I can't stand gum under tables. She just wanted a free meal. She insisted I paid for an expensive sushi place, but when she was on her phone and wouldn't even have a conversation with me, I asked the waitress for separates checks and she got pissed and left without paying, getting banned. I did end up paying after she left and was banned. It was her favorite sushi place too. Oh well. Furnit. Then I sexually assaulted by this girl. Read this incorrectly at least 6 times. Oh man, I have a good one. Gonna point this bad boy. Maybe a year and a half ago I went on a date who started the evening by saying, "Oh, so you're like, a strong 3?" And when I jokingly responded, "So, a 4?" she reaffirmed, "Nah, strong 3 inches," after the cashier at the restaurant made a mistake calculating the bill and accidentally overcharged us for the drinks. She said, "Aren't your people supposed to be good at maths?" We were at a Mexican restaurant, so not only was she being awfully racist, it wasn't even the correct hateful stereotype. Also, the dude was white. After sorting that out, I suggested that we split the bill 50-50, as I'd had a pretty bad time and didn't want or expect a second date, to which she responded, "It's your treat," and walked out to wait for me on the sidewalk outside. She suggested that we go back to her place, and despite her being very attractive I was like, "Nah man, sorry," and she began screaming, demanding I go back with her, and complaining that she's just wasted a whole night. I bail and ditch her, go home to tell my housemates of the disaster. After telling this story, one of them says, "Strong 3? Dude, that's terrible. You're not a strong 3, you're like a weak 5 inches, so a fucking 4? Just say 4." Edit. Because people keep asking about the maths racial comment part, she had spent the majority of the date being casually, subtly racist, but it wasn't funny, interesting, so I didn't list it in the story. Still an assumption on my part, but given her track record it was an incredibly easy one. Not as bad as yours, but while we were having dinner, her roommate and her roommate's little brother were passing by, so she invited them to eat with us. They were actually super nice. I wasn't clear on whether this was prearranged. A coincidence that she jumped on because she wasn't digging my vibe. Her not knowing it was weird to invite people into a date in progress. Me mistaking a friendly outing for a date. Or her just not being really interested in me. I didn't really think too hard about it. I enjoyed my food, enjoyed their company, and that was our last date or whatever it was. I've been in that situation. She said, "Hey, my friend is working in a hotel bar, let's check it out." It was deserted except for her friend who occasionally joined us to chat. We got a bunch of free drinks. Then the barmaid's boyfriend joined us at closing time blackout drunk and we carried him to the next bar. It later turned out she'd been super anxious about drinking alone with a guy she didn't really know, and her friend was backup, which is fair enough. It was a good night anyway. Probably not as bad as you, but when I was 17 I met a guy through Grindr. Was supposed to be 19. Well, he showed up late. And he was 40. I left that date very quickly. Just the other night I had a first and only date with a girl for who misrepresented herself on her POF profile. We went out for karaoke at her regular bar. It said she didn't smoke. Smoking is a huge turnoff for me and it says so in my profile. She spent 3/4 of the time outside smoking and she smelled like an ashtray. She was 41 but looked 51. She was clearly using old pictures. Most of the time she wasn't smoking, she was wandering around talking to the other regulars. After about 2 hours I cashed out and left. If there hadn't been karaoke it would have been a lot sooner. She was all surprised. Totally oblivious to the fact that she was ignoring me and smelled disgusting.